I don't know if I'm gonna finish. Welcome to my channel. I'm Nikki. This is a development log focusing on my first experience in a game jam. It's also my first video on YouTube, so I want to introduce myself. I'm 27 years old, living in New York City, and I'm a full-time not anymore. And I'm a full-time software engineer and part-time fitness instructor. Game development is a big hobby and passion of mine. I've been learning how to use tools like Unity, Blender, and Logic Pro X for about a year and a half or so. While I've had a few ideas and detailed prototypes, I haven't released anything. Recently, I've been really inspired by a lot of the YouTubers like DevDuck, Jonas Tyroller, Blackthorn Prod, Danny, and I've learned a lot from watching them. And after seeing a lot of the progress that all of them have made, I think that there's something to be said about making videos on game development. I'm gonna try to do the same so that one day I can look back and see how far I've come, how much I've learned, and hopefully teach other people in the process. I don't think there's much of a better way to learn something than trying to teach it. So with that being said, the rest of this video is about my experience in the StaySafe jam. I hope you learned something, and if nothing else, I hope it's entertaining. So the theme of this jam is called solidarity. That's the idea of togetherness and overcoming something together. I was having a really hard time coming up with an idea for this jam, actually. I almost didn't do it because I was having such a hard time. The jam is only 48 hours, so there's not much time, especially somebody as new as me. But the idea is, with the virus going on, I thought that it would be interesting to do a game around that. You're gonna play as a white blood cell. You're going to go around and get as many other white blood cells as you can, and you need a certain amount of white blood cells to destroy each of the viruses on the screen. I think that still classifies as solidarity, but maybe it doesn't. We're just gonna see how it goes. So it's like 6:30 on a Saturday morning. The StaySafe jam has been going on for about 12 hours. I've got a pretty good foundation of what I want this game to be, but I have a lot of work to do before this is over. I started off Saturday by creating a new project in Unity. I titled it Viral. I deleted the default extras, and then I set up a GitHub repository for the project. I then opened up Blender and got to work. Because the available time on Friday was spent thinking of an idea and coming up with the title, I knew what the next steps were. I knew that I would need at least 3 models, 1 for red blood cell, 1 for a white blood cell, and 1 for a virus. Fortunately, none of these were very complex models, so it didn't take very long. And once all 3 were complete, I was able to import their FBX files into Unity. I started to set up the main scene for the game, rotating the camera to a top-down perspective, setting the view to orthographic, and modifying the background to have a red blood-like tint. I did notice that the model of the blood cell was colored gray the further it was from the main camera. This was caused by the default fog settings and was resolved by disabling the fog altogether. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a bloodstream, I imagine everything floating and rotating, so I started writing a script that would randomly rotate whatever game object the script was attached to. So I attached it to the red blood cell and just started staring at it rotating. Happy to see that the script worked exactly as expected. I then created prefabs for the white blood cell and the virus, and I added the same rotation script to both of them. I entered play mode and got to see all 3 of them rotating as expected. For my next step, I wanted to make the background more interesting. The only 2 interactable game objects would be the white blood cells and the viruses, so I wanted to spawn a bunch of blood cells and have them float across the screen in the background. This seemed like a great fit for Unity's particle system. I'd recently learned that it could use custom meshes for the particles, so I selected the blood cell mesh, made some modifications to the other parameters, and here's how it turned out. It was time to get things moving, literally. With my understanding of Unity's movement system, I knew of 2 different methods to get the white blood cells moving. One that takes advantage of Unity's physics system, and one that doesn't. I initially thought that I wouldn't need to use the physics system, but then I read through a bunch of forum threads, and from what I understood, it seemed like Unity's collision detection works better with rigid body physics. So I threw out the basic movement code that I already written, and I rewrote it to take advantage of the rigid body physics. I still don't know which is the right way to go, but if you have a better understanding, leave a comment below explaining why one might be better than the other. It's now 11:30. I started setting up the game state, so the way that I want the actual game loop to go. Like most games, the player is going to have health. When there are more viruses on the screen, then the health will deplete faster and faster. And when a player gets rid of a virus, it's actually going to add back health. So the whole loop is just that there will be more viruses, and then the health will go down, the player will get rid of the viruses, the health will go back up, so you're going to last as long as you can, the score is going to go up, and it's just basically going to last as long as possible. I created an empty game object and called it GameState. Then I attached a script with the same name and added a variable for the player health with a default value of 100. A special shout out to the developer Minions Art. I've been a patron of hers for at least 6 months, and she's a shader genius. I watched one of her Twitch streams recently where she did a tutorial for a vertical dissolve shader, and I took the time to replicate that here. I'll link to her Twitter in the comments, and maybe in another video I'll do a breakdown of the shader myself. You may have already noticed a few pieces of Viral's UI. As the day went on and I fleshed out more of the game, I thought of 3 details that a player would actively want to keep track of: the current health, their score, and a timer to let them know how long they've lasted. Additionally, I would need a button for the title screen. But before I implemented the UI, I wanted to add a little more style to the game with some custom fonts. A while back I found this package of 10,000 fonts that I've made use of on multiple occasions. I'll provide a link in the description for anyone interested. So I added a canvas along with 3 text fields and a button for the start screen. After finding a font and importing it as an asset into Unity, you just need to drag the font to the inspector window of the text. Now to get the timer working, I went back to my GameState file and started writing some code. I would store the start time of the round and subtract the value from time.time. Time.time gives you the current amount of time that the game has been running, so subtracting the start time would return the growing timer value. The only thing left was to convert that float to minutes and seconds and set the timer's text value to a formatted string. To get the score to increase over time was a little different than the timer. I created a float variable that would receive time.deltaTime in the update method. When this value was over 1, we would add 10 points and reset the timer back to 0. This seemed like a more fluid way to increase the score, and it turned out to work pretty well in the end. Now overall, it was a pretty simple UI, but given the time constraints of the game jam, I was pretty happy with it. The funny thing I learned from doing this game jam was how fast time flies. By the time I had researched and implemented the stuff already shown, Saturday was over. Today is Sunday, March 29th. I'm really happy with the progress that's been made. I just don't know if I'm going to finish. I hope I do. I'd like to finish something for once. So, yeah, we'll see what goes on today. We'll see. Sunday started with setting some boundaries. I added 4 colliders for out-of-bounds game objects and wrote a one-liner that would destroy the object on collision. At the same time, I set up the boundaries for the player. Because I decided to use the physics engine, all I needed to do was set up 4 box colliders that would act as walls and keep the player within the camera view. One of the most important features of the game was a system that would be used to spawn viruses and blood cells. I created an empty game object called spawn controller and attached a script with the same name. I was now able to both keep track of and add viruses and white blood cells into the game, and that allowed me to manage Viral's difficulty in addition to the player's health, which was supposed to be based on the number of viruses currently active. I made 8 spawning cubes for visual reference outside of the camera view. The spawn controller stored a list of all these cubes and instantiated new white blood cells and viruses from their scripts. Each of these spawners has their own list of references for the spawners that were on the opposite side of the play area. When a new virus or white blood cell was instantiated, it would randomly choose one of these spawners' transforms and start heading in that direction. This would add to the game's variety when you don't know where the white blood cells or viruses are going to come from. At around 12 o'clock on Sunday, I had an idea. What if you could pick which white blood cell you were controlling on the screen? It was a random feature that I wasn't really sure would be necessary, but I thought it was a pretty fun idea, and I guess that's the most exciting part about a game jam, experimentation. So I set off and tried to bring this idea to life. Figuring it out actually took quite some time, but eventually it got running. I left myself about an hour to spare when it came time to actually compiling the game into something that I could submit. This is a process I had never done before, but it wasn't too hard. I submitted what I had with 15 minutes to spare, and that was it. My first project submitted to a game jam, albeit broken, but submitted nonetheless. It's been about a month since the game jam ended. It turns out that making videos actually takes a lot of time. But in that time, I've had to go back and revisit the project and the code to capture more footage. Taking a second look has definitely helped me grasp some of the new concepts that I was looking at during the game jam, which is exactly what I was hoping for. Was this idea something worth pursuing? I can definitely see it on the App Store, especially now during the coronavirus where everything is all about the virus. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
As for this YouTube channel, I definitely want to keep on going. I've had a great time learning how to use Final Cut Pro. The only difference I can really imagine is making smaller videos. This did take about a month's time, and I think making something on a weekly or bi-weekly basis is a much better idea. I'd really be happy to do some tutorials on the stuff that I showed in the game jam, or I could share project updates on some of the bigger things that I have going on. As I said at the start of the video, I hope you learned something new, or you at least found it entertaining. You can like this video or subscribe to see what's next. It'd really help me out and let me know that I'm headed in the right direction. See you guys in the next video.